Hey, yo, turn it up as loud as it go. Come on, hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
This is Hill and Chill as Fuck the podcast. It's your boy Tristan Mitchell, licensed clinical social worker with Soco Ray Therapy.
And it's me, your girl, Socorro Reynoso, aka Soco Ray, owner of Soco Ray Therapy, licensed clinical social worker.
And this is Robin Dial, associate clinical social worker with Soco Ray Therapy and resident hip hop head with this therapy for us, by us. Hill and Chill as fuck podcast.
We in here, baby.
Let's get it.
Back up in the easy for another episode of Hill and Chill as fuck.
What's up?
We gonna get this intro in and pick up and packing a punch, but all that matters is we are back and ready to dive in and get back to it. So y'all know how we start this thing off. What's in your mug? What you got in your mug?
Tris, what we got?
Today we actually Yo Faye hit us with a little something different. We doing
What's like an Arnold? Is it called an Arnold Palm? No, it's called a Shirley Temple when it looks like
a
this.
dirty Shirley Temple.
Oh, this is a dirty Shirley.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I gotta make sure when I bring the drinks, I got the titles down.
Miss Temple, like, if you're nasty. All right. Sorry.
I'm gonna have to take that back to your.
That's the name of the drink for sure.
Miss Temple, if you're nasty.
Yeah, for that dirty Shirley.
Okay, some of y'all are just listening to this. You're not watching us on YouTube, but you should because Robin looks so cute right now. I'm just gonna stare all show. You're giving me massive princess, powerful vibes.
Oh, thank you.
I love it.
But that low rider though on your shirt,
Robin bought this for me.
Hey.
Y'all see this? Healthy female bonding, not catty, gassing each other.
That's right, huh?
As always, because this week was women empowering women. I don't know if you've accepted the challenge, but
please do if you haven't.
Yes, please. We're sending out the challenge to every woman that's listening and watching this right now, to empower you and to uplift you. So post a picture of yourself in black and white and tag us at Hill and Chill AF on Instagram.
Thank you for highlighting that, Tristan, because you know what, that'll be another episode, but we do need to talk about that, like what it means to gas someone else. Oh, that's gonna be okay. Let's not even talk about it. I don't want to give any gems right now.
Save them gems.
Okay, so let's check in, huh? How's everybody feeling today?
I'm
good.
Wait,
I'm gonna ask the question different. Tristan, how have you been eating and sleeping lately?
Oh,
nice.
Dude, what?
You wasn't ready.
I was not.
Sounded like a therapist and whatnot.
But for those who may be like, what does that mean? It's essentially getting away from just how are you. That's such a blanket question, and there are so many other questions that can really evoke more of a response or be a little more telling. And because you mentioned that, and I was like, I've been sleeping well. I'm coming off of today is my first day back in the saddle. I was off for 4 days.
What was you doing?
Celebrating 5 years with the missus.
Hey.
We was on the boat.
Okay. Drunk. Big shit.
Boats and hoes.
Hey, we checked out that rooftop.
You went to Waldorf?
Mm-hmm.
Sick.
That was nice. But yeah, so that's probably been the first time in forever, which is so unlike me because to know me is to know I love traveling. I will throw some PTO out there in a minute. Fuck it, I'm out. But COVID canceled all our trips, literally 4 or 5 trips. So that was, this is probably the longest I've been without having to at least 4 consecutive days off. So it was dope. It was rejuvenating. And in terms of eating, well, I was eating like shit, but I'm back on it.
You're back on.
I'm back on it.
Welcome back, sir. How you been, Rob? No, wait, Robin. Name a color that describes a feeling you've held today.
Ooh, you out here challenging people and whatnot. I want to say blue, but like the turquoisey lighter blue color, and that represents calm for me. When I do my breathing exercises, I usually breathe in that color blue, and I say the word calm and then breathe out yellow as relax. I don't know why those two colors are like that for me, but that's what I do. I'm actually been feeling really calm. I have been working on a Zen space for myself on my little balcony.
Dope.
And so I literally laid out there in my balcony with my new cushions, and I was just feeling like
that bitch.
Yeah, like, cause speaking on trips, back in March, I was planning on like choosing an island and vegetating on that island for like 2 weeks, like, and just chill. But then, COVID came through and said, you thought.
That would have been dope.
Nah. So this little space I'm creating to feel that kind of like getaway. I'm going to have my little fountain that's like a little babbling brook or whatever, and just something to make me feel really peaceful, because that's what I feel like I've been missing a little bit, is having that secluded space just for peace. So I'm getting back to that. So I feel more calm lately.
That's dope.
Yeah.
What question y'all got for me?
What has been the highest part of your week and the lowest?
That's crazy, because I was going to suggest that. I will start with, lowest. Shit, y'all. Sometimes I have hard weeks. This past week hasn't been. So let me search a little bit for a low. You know what? I'm going to define a low as, here's what happened. Sisters squabble. Me and my 3 sisters was beefing. Not all of us together. It just happens in this old dyad form, and one's on the out. And during that time, so we all rekindled this weekend. The 3 of us were together for the first time in probably a year, and it felt good. And what we realized was that one of our sisters had been being spoken to in a disrespectful way the days that we weren't there to see her. She was in town. And I was just like mad at myself for allowing us, for not showing up for my sisters the way that I could consistently. Like, I'm giving myself grace and forgiveness for not always being a perfect sister, but I'm also like, if you don't treat yours right, you're basically conditioning them on how the world can treat them. And so I was mad at me and my sister for letting her be on the out. It's like, no, like the only people, this brings me back to a little bit of immature idea. When I found out the dude was talking to her that way, it wasn't a dude she was dating. Someone else who was talking to her disrespectfully, I was like, the only people who could be mean to my sister is us. Like, you got us all fucked up. But then taking it a step further is like, and we can't either. Because we're training our family on how to be treated. Yeah. So that was my low point. I wanted to fight, dude. And I texted my sister the next day. I said, don't you go back over there unless he apologizes. And if I'm with you, like, I will fight him for you. So that was a low point. High point was today. My other sister, she's interviewing for a job. And I did a mock interview with her today. And usually I would say I'm too busy to help someone. But like when it's my sister, it doesn't fucking matter. I'll clear the schedule. And so I cleared it. And we cried together because it's emotional. Interviewing, she was just like, I'm worried. And every question she was breaking down, I said, okay, you know what? After I record tonight's podcast, we're doing it again. And you're going to do it with me tomorrow morning. Like, we're going to get these nerves out. And just to help her realize, I had her close her eyes when she was crying. And I said, recall that all this is requesting from whoever you petition your request to, the God, the universe, whatever, that you are able to communicate the knowledge you already have. An interview, the nervousness is really like that setting, that process. It's not, you believe you can do the job, you know what you know, but it's this fear in being able to communicate what you know. So we took a moment in prayer to just say, like, let's bring it all together and ask God to help you communicate what you already know. So that was a beautiful moment where I was able to love on her and she was able to receive the love. That was my high for sure today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sorry for being so long, but it was a beautiful moment.
No, never too long for the check-in.
Thanks, Tris.
Before we can get into these topics and hopefully drop these gems, we got to make sure we good. Can't be pouring from empty cups, so check-in can't never be too long.
You know what? Thank you for that. Hell of a gym.
Somebody gonna ding me. I'm gonna ding myself.
Okay.
We're all about self-determination
and self-love.
Yes.
That's right. All right. So today's topic, we're just starting this topic, okay? I'm not going to tell you what order we're going to put it in because we ain't that organized yet. But there will probably be some follow-up episodes on relationships with our parents, the impact that our parents have on us, the expectations for parents, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just jump right into, well, I'll start with, when I was thinking of like, okay, so we're talking about parenting, what are we going to talk about? And I'm writing everything under the sun because legit, so much of our lives are shaped by who raised us or who failed to raise us, who wasn't present, who was present. It's all shaped by it. So the list goes on and on and on. The first thing that came to my mind when I thought about parenting is what shows up in the therapy space. And this may or may not be true for all people, but in many ways, one of the ways that parenting can have a negative impact is when children experience parents choosing something over them, or they interpret that their parent is choosing something over them. And examples that I can think of is a substance, a profession, a lover, either a new relationship or an affair, another sibling. So there's these many ways that children interpret that their parents must not love them because their parents chose this other thing. So that's been one way that I've seen that show up. And so I know that how you are parented affects your framework, right? So what you learn in your home, the meaning you hold for yourself in your home, the way you're treated in your home, it's like an assumption that it's carried in your brain. Everywhere you go, you assume that you will have the same identity everywhere you go, and you will be treated the same way everywhere you go. And so I think it's really important for us to deconstruct what we learned about our worth. And we're not always accurate in our interpretation of what happened and what we mean as a result of what happened to us. So just undoing it all to see what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep, I think is really important.
Yeah, that's the core, where the first place our core beliefs
are created.
Yeah, the view that we have of the world, the view that we have of ourselves, and the view that we have of people all starts with that relationship. A lot of clients that I talk to, or what I see in therapy sessions is the first thing is that attachment, that a parent-child attachment. A lot of people have these anxious attachments, they're avoidant attachments, depending on how their parent showed up for them. As a young child, I mean, we learn these things, we start developing these ideas from the gate. You know what I'm saying? Like all of these experiences that we have, even as toddlers, there's the what's the Erickson stages of development, and you can look this up. It gives you kind of the age ranges and what things we develop in those age ranges. And if we miss something in those stages, it impacts our life later on in the stage of trust and mistrust. Like if we don't have that type of trust in our home, it's like we don't trust anybody later on in life, and we don't understand why we can't develop other type of relationships, or we struggle with interpersonal relationships or romantic relationships or friendships when way back when we were
age 1, we're
1,
talking
2, or 3.
Like when I cried, did my parent respond?
Exactly.
And I think the challenging part is once we get to adulthood, and for a lot of folks, they would think this is black and white. Like, your parents did some shit, but I think where we see it more commonly is, and again, this is in my experience, it's probably less of the classic case of maybe an abusive parent or an incarcerated parent. I think the real challenge and damage is often done by those normal parents and those parents who slid under the radar because they didn't fit into any classic box of being addicted. They didn't abandon you, so on paper they did what they were supposed to. They
were present.
Yeah, they were present. You guys did things, and it's more of those subtle ways that their personality shows up. And oftentimes, once you really push yourself to do the work, it's often the shit that used to annoy you growing up. Like before you probably have fully internalized and sucked it up or started to apply it to yourself. It was it's that same shit where you flash forward, however, and it's normally people being like, oh, you were just a teen. Nah, that shit wasn't it. That shit wasn't cool. I wasn't just a teen or a kid, and I just wasn't annoyed with my parent. Of course, there are cases when it is, but I think too many things slide under the radar, under the guise of all teenagers, all people are upset, and it's no, that we need to look a little further into that and figure out what's going on. And it may be something that you can't identify. So coming to therapy is helpful because in talking through it, we're trained to ask ask this question, that question, whatever questions we need to ask to kind of dig it out of you and maybe even highlight it in a way that you might not have otherwise even thought of. Do you guys see that where not necessarily those classic cases of the traditional abuse, like very direct abandonment, but do you guys have people who show up in the office and you have to help them connect the dots to see where or how some of their shit was their parent shit, because maybe their parent doesn't fit into that classic mode of toxicity?
Mm-hmm. I'll say that I'll have a few answers for this. The first one that comes to my mind is parents who were not emotionally available. Like I can relate to that. My father was super duper provider and always at every game, but didn't have much to say to me about like what he thought of me, how he felt about me. So grateful for what he was. And what I see in the therapy room is they're not kids anymore, children of parents who we see some clients who don't have vocabulary for emotion. And it's a lot of work as a therapist. Still come see us, but it's easier when people can just talk and talk and talk. But some people really don't even know how they feel because they haven't been related to in a way that acknowledges feelings and exposes them. But
I think that it speaks to, I guess, even you put it perfectly, that speaks to that untraditional dynamic of where you think of toxicity because you provided me this life, you did these things. And I think we live in a society and culture where the emotional piece isn't often acknowledged enough. It's kind of like, be grateful for what you had, or the comparison game. There are people who had it worse. At least you had this or that. And it's like, so what? I can be grateful for the parts of my life that wasn't fucked up and also make room for the parts where it was like, yo, like, this was shitty. Or this kind of left me, like you said, without skills that I should have. And y'all know me, blackity black. We see that a lot within our community, that lack of emotional intelligence, because often as long as you were provided for, then you were good, and there is no room for you to come.
And we don't, and you probably already said this and I'll say it again, like, we don't blame our parents. We don't make them wrong for it. The world is evolving. Different coping, different skills were needed 20, 30 years ago than are needed now. But we just recognize that we missed something that is now needed, and it's our work. We don't resent our parents for not teaching us. We take the responsibility upon ourselves because we want to live full lives to adapt to and adopt the new ways.
Yeah, I think what Tristan brings up, what we would consider the obvious things that would impact someone's life. I have clients that do have that, what we would consider to be obvious trauma in a lot of different ways from parents, but there's like other things besides that, because we have very mature people that come in and say, like, I know this was wrong, but they also know how to rationalize it really well because they know their parents have had a certain life or an upbringing. And so they minimize their own pain and their anger because they understand why their parents are the way they are. And so that speaks back to what you were saying about being able to hold space for, like, understanding who your parents are and where they came from, but also still believing that you have the right to be upset about what happened to you in your upbringing and how that's impacted your life. It's not so much of a blaming thing, but it's like, just a recognizing and having awareness of how that felt, but also being able to understand that our parents are human beings and that our parents have been through shit too. And usually you can see the generational mistakes or shit that keeps coming up, the trauma, like, seeing one person go through something with their parents and then them following along in the same suit and being the same way for their children. So we can rationalize it and say it makes sense to where you came from, but we can also still hold
some credence for ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm even thinking one of the, not the goals to say this is the perfect place to be, but I'd encourage people to try and get to a place where they can hold in mind their parents' experience for the sake of compassion and maybe so not to give them an out, not to hold against them, but like hopefully that can help you to be compassionate, because I think we'd all agree as we're coming up against these challenges and once we are adults and stuff, it is easy to just kind of want to be like, fuck you, like I don't want to deal with you or I don't want to do this. And sometimes that compassion allows for you to continue to like extend some grace, or allows for you to show back up. And even if you show back up with boundaries, it may allow for you to still be respectful or be whatever type of way, but at the same time still identifying what your boundaries are and staying true to them. So I guess it goes back to hold, and I can make space for you, but also I won't continue to subject myself. I know your story, I know your pain. However, it ends here. And if that means I might even have to remove myself, then maybe I'll remove myself. And perhaps the compassion just allows for me to maybe be open to opening this door again one day. But
Thank you for saying that, because I was just going to chime in and talk about like navigating that boundary. And it's difficult for some, more hard for others, I think. And I encourage everyone to do whatever it is that they need. And I know that a lot of people have a hard time just setting a firm boundary with family, like I'm just not fucking with them. And one way I think that you can, it doesn't mean it's going to be well received, but at least you communicated through it, is by letting your family know like why you're taking the break, what this break is for, what it is you're working on, what it is you hope for. And your parents may or may not receive it, or your guardian, caregivers, whatever it is, but it's worth at least expressing and giving them the opportunity to receive.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people come in looking for permission from the therapist to disconnect from these relationships, because we're taught so much that family is like so important,
family
and that,
over everything.
that no matter what, you gotta be close to your family. And I'm here to say that that's not true, because I mean, it depends on how you define family. Because if family are people that love you, that care for you, that respect your boundaries, that, you know, show up for you in certain ways, that could be somebody who's not blood related to you. I have a ton of aunts and uncles, and I could tell you my parents' best friends, I consider them to be like my aunts and uncles, because they are the ones who showed up to my graduation. They're the ones who are there for me anytime I need something. Like, that's my definition of family. So I feel like you may have somebody who's mothered you in a way that you really needed, and that might not be your actual mom, or, you know, it might be your aunt, it might be your grandmother, it might be an older person that was a friend, you know, that came in and gave you what you need. Maybe it's yourself. Maybe you've learned to mother yourself in a certain way and give yourself that appreciation. But, you know, it's about what you define family, in my opinion, and then that allows you to give yourself permission to step away from something that maybe is not going to change. Maybe it's going to be what it is, and it's too painful for you to continue to subject yourself to. Yeah.
So there's and you guys, I'm like 10 years out of grad school, so like I don't remember the theorist names and shit, forgive me, but I have the knowledge. And I'm thinking about the stage in life that's called individuation, right, where you separate from your family and create your own identity that includes much of them, and then much newness that's required for this stage in your life, this stage in the evolution of mankind. And it's sort of an American concept. And what I see in a lot of my clients, I have a lot of, I say Latino, Latina, but I know you're supposed to say Latinx now, so I'll say Latinx. In the Latinx community who are here in their first generation, and it's different. Individuating and separating and leaving the house is seen as an act of defiance, that you don't accept or respect or love them, that you don't like them, and that creates a lot of issues. Sometimes I sit there and I'm like, fuck, that does sound hard, to be in the space that you're trying to repair yourself from, like, and still be in the face of your mother who berates you.
Consistently exposed to the trigger.
So I'll say this as a therapist, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, but to like fucking practice your guided visualization so that you can manifest your own place, because that's required. But a part of me always feels like, not always, a part of me sometimes feels like, how can I say that? Like, how? If that's against their cultural beliefs and their practices, and that's disrespectful, I can't encourage that. I have to work within the frame of what works for my client. But it's difficult.
Having to make the balance between like, the traditional culture, especially if you're first generation, and being Americanized and you know, your parents kind of somewhat assimilating, but not really, like just enough so they can get by with whatever they need, but for the most part still holding on to those beliefs. I've definitely seen that. And I've really had to like help people to kind of determine their voice from their parents' voice, like just seeing a lot of self-esteem issues from those cultural ideas about how you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing, but then you've grown up in a space that says that you're empowered and that you're your own person and that you don't need these certain things and you don't have to be in this certain place at a certain time. You don't have to look a certain way every time you go out. You can be comfortable. You don't have to dress like a well brought up lady or whatever whatever that means, you know, and that a lot of that, knowing the difference between how you feel and what your family feels, and knowing how to kind of like navigate in a space that you can't get out of, is just like tough. Extremely stressful. I've definitely helped people create safe spaces in their homes that they can escape to in their mind, just to give them a break from that torment.
Yeah. And for those who, so I definitely want both of you to piggyback for the listeners out there who may be like, mom wasn't a drug addict, dad wasn't abusive, whatever. And again, we're talking like those more classic cases, and you may just be feeling like off, like there's some conflict, or sometimes it's not even conflict. Sometimes you just look up and be like, the way this, and sometimes it comes with your own growth, you know, like as you grow, I believe that people can grow out of toxicity. So as you grow, maybe you looking and you're just like, what is this shit? Like, this doesn't resonate with me. This doesn't sit well with me. And it could have been what's been going on your whole life. So I think it's also maybe helpful to point out some of those small ways that people may not be able to identify, but maybe if we name them, they can be like, oh, okay, I see how my parent kind of missed the mark there. What's coming to mind to me is, and I'm sure a lot of people saw the memes, like it, and I hate that it's even a narrative for the black community, but this narrative that if we disagree is disrespectful. If I don't align with your opinion, it's disrespect, and it's so counterproductive to we're always taught to like grow up, be yourself, like don't be following nobody, don't do these things. But then it's like, so I don't follow anybody but you because as I express my disagreement or whatever, it doesn't even have to be in some crazy way. I might just be like, I ain't really sure. And it's like often, so I think if you grew up with a dismissive parent where you tried to bring things and it was always twofold. It could have been, nah, that ain't important, or you'll be all right, or you good. Or it could be the opposite, like, who you think you're talking to, whatever. I think while we survived it, we're okay. Those are subtle signs of toxicity too, and kind of not making space for you and making room for, if you think about it, that's not really raising this person up to advocate for themselves. Like, we like to think because we're telling you don't do it with other people, but again, like you said, this is kind of that primal, that first relationship, the one we're kind of conditioned to go after. So now I don't advocate because I was always told like, what you going through ain't important, or that's not really that serious, or I'll say this one and then I'll pass it. I used to be so used to this. Just I think growing up black, I'll say some definitely in my own family too. I've seen like where people talk to kids so fucked up and shitty. And it's just like the thing, like, I don't know if you guys have seen those memes where maybe it's the acronym like IDGAF, whatever, and it's like, you black if you can read this.
Yeah, we can all read it.
And it'd be crazy stuff like,
if you don't get your motherfucking ass in this motherfucking house right now, I'm gonna beat that.
And I'm like, that's not normal. Like that.
Well, the fact that we can decode that so quickly.
Take it back. That is normal, and that's the unhealthy and sad part of that. So many of us have that experience, or it resonates with us that you were talked to like that. Why can't you just, hey, come in the house? Like, I'm not playing with you. Like, why did you have to be so demeaned? And then I think we get surprised when people grow up and their growth is stunted and they don't leap and they don't leave the house and they don't have, where were they supposed to get that resilience from? Where was that ambition going to come from when you were always suppressed to like these awful words? I don't know. Growing up, I never thought that stuff would bother me, and now I like cringe.
Well,
you
see what it's created. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the issue. I'll add in, this is maybe one sign, I have another one to add, but I have a niece who's very outspoken and she's brilliant, she's creative, and she calls adults on their shit, and she likes to be engaged with adults in conversation because she's that intelligent and that's how she needs to track. And adults in parties will tell her, like, you know, this is grown folks business. And I understand it because there's something she shouldn't hear, but I also think that we either need to be more careful and not talk about things when children might run up on it, or B, explain it differently. Because what you're saying is like, this is a conversation that's above your ability to partake in. And I feel like that is a subtle way to say, like, you don't qualify. Mm-hmm. And that actually hinges on what I did want to say is one way to notice that. Again, I want to be real careful to say, like, we're not saying parents are fucked up. We're just saying that parents do mess up, all of them. And this is one way that parents, our generation of parents, I think, missed the mark is, and there were reasons for it, mm-hmm. is we failed to affirm. Yes. We failed to say, you're beautiful. I think you're intelligent. Thank you. That was a great idea. You impress me every time I see you. When you walk into the room, it feels brighter. And one way to recognize that you didn't get that is if you get compliments as an adult and it makes you feel uncomfortable and you deflect and give me a butt. If I tell you your nails look good, and I'm guilty of this too, I'll be like, don't look too close, the left one's chipped, like scratch it. That means you're uncomfortable receiving praise. So I think that's one indicator of something that you need to practice for yourself, is that affirming, because you probably didn't get it. If you got it, you would feel comfortable when you get it as an adult.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways that I think that even people would think are healthy, like even in the affirming way, that can also cause distress later on in life. And I think my own experience was that when I was very little, I saw a lot of conflict in my household. And for some reason, I felt super protective of my mom. So if she would be arguing with someone in the house, I would always go to her and I'll be like, but I love you, Mom. And I'm like 3 years old, right? 2-3 years old. So I know that it's not right. And somehow I feel like she needs me in some way. And so, you would think nothing bad can happen from that. You're telling her you love her. That's it, right? But my mom used to respond like, oh my God, Robin, thank you so much. And then I started hearing like, I don't know what I would do without you. If I didn't have you here, I would be, you know what I'm saying?
So
like,
it's a thin line, you're saying.
Right. So it became internally, it became my job to make sure that she was okay. And I became that person in all of my relationships in my life. Like, I felt like my value was wrapped up in this, people have to feel this way about me, or I don't know where I stand with people. They have to be telling me that, I am this person for them. I've saved them in some way, or I've helped them in some way. And so that became difficult for me, because in all my relationships, I dealt with people whom my world revolved around them, because I needed that. Oh, thank God for Robin. Thank you. And it's like, my mom, obviously, that wasn't her intention. Her intention was to be like, I appreciate you, but I internalized that at a young age, is like, that's where my value lied, was in making her feel okay. Yeah. In her discomfort. And so like
relieving her.
Exactly.
God, so basically what you're saying is like, this is exactly why parents, you're gonna fuck up, okay?
Because
it's a thin line between like affirming and giving too much affirmation.
Right. That's what I was gonna say, like just circling back into the idea of parents. If you're a parent, I don't care how much you try to be the best parent that you could be and try to create a situation that was better than yours, whatever the case may be, you're gonna do there's gonna be something, because things are changing and evolving all the time. But the biggest mistake that I see with parents is that they have one experience that they didn't like, and their goal is to give their kids the opposite experience, and then they end up on the other side of the spectrum, which is not healthy either. They go from like, I was neglected, I wasn't cared for in a certain way, I didn't feel affirmed, I didn't feel all of these things. Now I have a kid and I'm gonna affirm the shit out of them. I'm gonna make sure they have. My mom used to stand over our cribs so that we wouldn't cry. That's how much she didn't want her children to have a certain experience. And that created a lot of dysfunction. Like, you didn't allow people to feel and have feelings, and like you know
also you wasn't hugged up next to your man.
He was right. Resentment in relationships for pouring so much energy into other people, all of those things. But I say that to say that, you know, our experiences push us to do things that are the opposite, instead of looking at the things that went right in our lives and trying to connect with that and bring that into our children's lives.
Yeah, and let me say this as we kind of move the show along, and hopefully this is the piece where we kind of bring in not necessarily some gems, but some skills, some advice. Of course, if it's anything else you guys just wanted to get off, but I was going to say, I think that it's important to know it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be upset. It's important that you also hold in mind that no one's perfect. And like Robin said, if God decides you'll be a parent, you won't be the perfect parent, because perfection doesn't exist. But I do think that it's really important for us to allow ourselves to feel, for us to sit with self long enough to really explore what isn't resonating with me about my parent or my caregiver or my life
what
experience.
Do I resent?
And develop boundaries to protect yourself from that. Create your new normal. The boundaries can be from extreme to light to whatever it is, but do know this is where that part comes in. When you come to therapy and you sign informed consent, there are risks and benefits, and while the benefits is peace exists on the other side, the risk you run is going to be painful. You are going to be grieving the loss of this relationship. The parents, part of it is you grieve the loss of the parents that you thought you had, or the parents you wish you had, and coming to terms with what your reality was. And all of these things that are kind of instilled in us, because especially in the Black community, we're programmed to really respect especially our mamas. Like, we're really programmed to respect our moms and dads, depending. But I think sometimes, depending, it's more acceptable to not mess with your dad or whatever. But I think we're really programmed to mess with our parents to a level where it almost feels like betrayal. To even be open to the idea that your parents could have fucked you up in some way.
People don't want to go there. It feels like disrespect.
And my homework would just be to push yourself beyond that, whether it's journaling, hit you a therapy session, push yourself beyond that discomfort, because I'm a firm believer that freedom does exist on the other side, and freedom may exist without them, or freedom may exist with a new way, and it just looks different. But you are the author of your story, and you don't have to stay in situations that, in Soko's words, don't serve you.
Yes, I was just, you know me well, because that's exactly what's going to come out of my mouth.
Yeah, I would say if you are a parent or want to become a parent, or really, really get in touch with what I want to say is, like, get in touch with the idea of like what you experienced with your parents, and like now when you go into being a parent, like what would you have wanted from your parent that would have helped you to kind of process whatever went on between you and your parents? I find that something as simple as a parent acknowledging that they weren't perfect and that they made some mistakes, that, you know, they did the best that they could without us rationalizing it, but just hearing that from the parent, and for us to be able to say, you know, even as adults, like, you know, this really fucked me up. Like, and it's not, I'm not saying that because I think you're a bad person. I'm not saying that to shame you or blame you, but I'm seeing how it's showing up in my life in a way that's negative. And I just want to talk, you know, I just want to talk about it, because I also don't want to repeat these cycles when I have kids. And I say anybody interested in having children really needs to sit with that, because you are not going to be perfect. You and all of your issues and what you've learned is going to show up in some way that may not be the way for you, because every kid is different. Every kid has their own personality, and things that worked for one child might not work for another, and you might have resistance and all that. But being able to keep it real and say, like, you know, parents are human beings too. I'm a human being, and I can acknowledge when maybe I could have done something better.
Yeah. Thank you. I was going to talk about a practice, and I will, but I want to chime in because what you just said was a part of my healing process in therapy. I was 30. My father was in the hospital. He was in hospice, actually. Not hospice. That's the wrong word. He was in a nursing facility. And I went to visit him. And before I did, I had a therapy session. My therapist, because we thought my dad might die, my therapist said, you might want to tell him how he's impacted you. And I'm like, on his deathbed? I'm not about to lay him down with more things to feel guilty about. She's like, no, let's just see what happens. Just be brave. So I went in there after having been in therapy for a very long time. Okay, so I wasn't charged. I didn't want him to hurt anymore. I was at a point where I wanted him to know. And I was interested in an apology, an acceptance of fault, some remorsefulness, whatever. And I remember I walked in, my dad could hardly talk, and I was just like, Dad, there's something I want to tell you. And I told him, like, our relationship has actually impacted the way that I relate to men now, and this is what I've noticed. And my dad was nodding, and at the end he was just like, wow, like, I had no idea. And that was all I needed to hear. It was like, oh shit, you didn't do that on purpose? You aren't actually just a dick. You were just moving without thinking or feeling. And so I'm glad I did it. And that took a while for me to build up the strength to be able to. But the peace that I received, now I know, like, Daddy, you did not love me. You just didn't know any better. Yeah. Which is very different. So now I will move on to the coping skill, right? Like, is that what you asked, Tris? Like, what can we do? So parents will miss the mark in one place or more. And like I said earlier, we can't keep shifting blame and pointing the finger, because that doesn't help anything. That just carries on with resentment. That's not what we want. We're trying to live full lives. So what you can do is you actually have the power to reparent yourself. You can sit with a therapist, sit with yourself, and ask yourself, when I was a child, what are some things I missed? And we do guided imagery with some of our clients, where we take them back to a childhood memory. And, the you now visits the child then, and you walk up and you have a conversation, and you'll be like just shocked at what comes out of your imagined mouth in that scene, and what that child needs to hear and what that child tells you. So you get back in touch with that child through practice, and then you start giving yourself what it is you needed. And typically what shows up when I guide my clients through a childhood memory is something they told that child that's actually what they need to hear every day now. So it's like, you're okay. It's actually not that big of a deal. Like, this will all work out. This is all, whatever it is. And then you carry that affirmation with you daily, consistently, and you can actually be what you needed to have.
Yeah, absolutely. So that being said, we're, as always, interested in our listeners and your experiences. So hit us in our DMs, Heal and Chill AF on Instagram. Share some of your experiences. Maybe if you have questions, maybe if there are things you kind of not resonating, you're not sure, just throw it our way, and we'll see what we can do with it. That being said, we will shout out our therapist for this week, and we are going to shout out Dr. Glenna Anderson. She is great about helping people work through some of their childhood things and just parenting in general at whatever stage. So I've seen her work personally, so I definitely think she's worth checking out. And you can find her on Instagram at Dr. Glenna LCSW, and Glenna GLENNA.
Is that DR?
Yep.
DR.
Yep. So
check her out.
With that gem drop that we got for the end, we're actually going to leave you with the question that's pretty profound. It comes from the work of Brene Brown, who anyone interested in vulnerability, and I'm a big believer that vulnerability is our gateway into healing.
Facts.
Check her out, and it's one simple question, and it's, are you the adult that you're raising your kids to be? And I think that turns us in the mirror. So sit with that.
That's a good one, Tris.
And we out. Until the next time we see y'all.
Peace out. Take care of you.
All right.
Gone.
This has been an Inclusive Media Podcast Studios production.